Okay, the very common theme here is that we want to prove triangle congruence, and then we're going to be able to use that triangle congruence to state that other corresponding parts are also congruent. What we're being asked to prove here is that angle M is congruent to angle R. That's this angle here and this angle here. Well, the only information that we can go on besides what's given to us, that those two sets of marked sides are congruent, is the fact that they share a side here. Okay, that's going to be the key, is that we know that something is reflexively congruent to itself, and then we will be able to prove congruence through that. So let's first start with what we know. We're going to say 1, side OM is congruent to side ER, and that's supposed to be a comma, and actually I'm going to leave that off because it's fine as long as it's on two lines here. ME, side ME is congruent to side RO. And the reason for both of those is that this is given information, and so we can list it on the same line of our two-column proof. So number 2, we're going to establish that OE, side OE, is congruent to side, and actually I'm not sure that I did this in the last problem, but it's important for us to write how they line up. And if we actually rotated these around, you would see that that part of this triangle coming along the end of this marked side there corresponds with that one there. So I'm going to write, instead of, they're really backwards if you're going from one to the other. So I'm going to say OE is congruent to EO. That's the same side, but I'm going to name it from this angle here that's at the end of the two marked one on this one, E then to O for, I should say O to E for here, and then E to O going backwards the other direction. So in case I wasn't clear there, what I mean is that the vertices line up in such a way that E corresponds with O when we reorient the triangles and land them on top of each other. So going from O to E on the first one is the same as going from E to O, the vertices E to O, to align the vertices when we're naming those sides. So this marks out of there. And then how do we know that that side is congruent to itself? Reflexive property. Reflexive property of congruence. Sorry, I ran out of space there. I have stuff on the side that you can't see that I need to not write over, or it'll choose those things instead of writing. Okay. Now what do we know? Well, now we know that the triangles are congruent through, well, let's first write what they are. O to M to E, starting there, going through the side with 1 to the side with 2. Triangle, actually, let me get those marks out of there. Triangle OME is congruent to triangle, and we're going from this vertex here through the one with 1 to the one with 2. And so we would call that triangle ERO. And how do we know that this is true? We know this because of side-side congruence. Once we proved that that side was reflexive to itself, we had 3 sides, and side-side is a congruence theorem. Okay, now once we know that, we can then make that final statement that angle M is congruent to angle R. And the reason that we know that is because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And as I said in the last video, I'm going to start writing it like this. I've been saying CPCT in class. You also hear it like that, corresponding parts of congruent triangles. But you also see it written like this, and I think the book has it written like that, so I'm going to write it like that as well. So that's it. This is very common, what you're going to be doing here, which is to be just extending from what you've already been doing, which is to prove two triangles are congruent, and then take it one step further and say, because we know that the two triangles are congruent through CPCTC, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. then we know that angle M is congruent to angle R. I just want to say this. I think occasionally there will be someone who hears CPCTC and then hears what it stands for. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, and it sounds like a bunch of words that it's unclear exactly, okay, what those words mean. I would stop, if you're just hearing a bunch of words there, stop and deconstruct it. Corresponding parts, meaning matching angles or corresponding sides of two congruent triangles. Once we know that they're congruent, then we know that the corresponding parts on each of those congruent triangles will also themselves, each individual part will be congruent. Just be clear on that you know what that's saying there. That's it.